Hey there. So today I'm speaking with Christian Rasmussen, owner of MN Botanicals, or is it MN? Like I forget your handles. I'm sorry.
Minnesota Nice, MN Nice. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
MN nice. And so in my Amanita journey that I began like a year and a half ago, this is who I was directed to purchase from. So, and then just recently I learned more about him. So I figured let's have a conversation about entheogens. So welcome, Christian. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here.
So,
Thank you.
so I guess start would be like, what is an entheogen? And what I've learned is that it's like basically like a spiritual mind expanding kind of a tool, like to take a plant medicine to expand your consciousness or your experience. But like, how would you phrase it?
That's exactly it. Yeah, I mean it's a medicine that produces spiritual experiences, religious or spiritual experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so like the Amanita, back when Amy Dempster was bringing it up, in my communication with her, and I've since had her on the episode on an episode. I don't remember which number it was, but it got me curious because I kind of spend time in between realms, and I just figured, what would it offer me? And as someone who consumes cannabis, like yeah, like cannabis can be considered an entheogen as well, and if used properly and with intention. And that's kind of how it is with the Amanita. And I remember one of the first instructions, and I was new to plant communication at that time too. Like I didn't even realize what herbalism consisted of, that people connect with the plants, the
Mhm.
energy and the essence and the spirit. So one of my first experiences with the Amanita, as instructed, was to just keep it on your bedside and connect with its energy
Yep.
before you even consume it. So, and then she's like, well, what did you get? She gave these prompts to the group class. And I'm like, when I tuned into it, it was doing the can. It was like happily dancing, like joyfully. And I was like, like, am I imagining this? So, and I know it has a very kind of joyful spirit. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so you said one thing which brought something up is that you kind of exist in both the realms, in the
Hmm.
spirit side and then the physical side.
Right.
I think that particularly, well, really with any of these entheogenic substances, they most of them really like bring you into the spiritual side while kind of you know taking away your concentration on the physical. Where
Hmm.
Amanita seems to do something a little bit different, where it kind of like roots you in both sides. You can kind of interplay both. You can play with both realities. You can play with the other reality and the physical, or the physical reality and the spiritual, which makes it an extraordinarily versatile tool. I think it's interesting that its physical manifestation here on Earth is this bright red, beautiful, eye-catching mushroom,
Hmm.
uh, when it has such a grounded aspect of it in the spiritual and in the physical. It's interesting.
Oh yeah, I saw you say something recently where you were saying what the Amanita is like the root and the crown at once or something. Were you saying that? Or are you
Well,
saying Blue
so
Lotus and Amanita? I don't remember.
no, so I think if and this is a generalization and it's a lot more nuanced than this, but if like something like psilocybin or DMT is like the crown chakra or the third eye, Amanita would be the lower chakras or the root.
Okay.
Again, it's more nuanced. Like it affects everything, but Amanita is significantly more physical. I feel like it brings you into yourself, where these other entheogens bring you into the other realms or into the cosmos.
Hmm.
Amanita brings you inward. These others bring you outward. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that one of the common experiences was almost like that, Alice in Wonderland, like you feel big or you feel small. And I remember feeling both, like on the Avenue, and then like kind of like just feeling bigger, and then also having visions of things from like an ant's perspective. Like I felt like I was looking up at a blade of grass, while I was like falling asleep or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So it's like you're little and you're big. So that's kind of like part of the whole connection to Alice in Wonderland too. So, and
Yeah.
it's so much in all our culture, and we just, we're never given permission to know it. So How did Amanita show up for you in your life then that kind of turned you on to, I know we've already talked about it, but just for the sake of
That's okay.
hearing
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell the story again. Well, so I've always been super interested in plant medicines, uh, pharmacology, anything that alters my state of consciousness. And now that I've grown older and I've realized what it's about, it's really an interest in connecting to the divine and connecting to that other realm, connecting to that higher aspect of myself. But I tried everything under the sun aside from Amanita. I had a very rough, addiction filled late teens and 20s, early 20s, mid 20s. And I was coming off of benzodiazepines, Klonopin to be specific, which are really brutal to come off of. They're, one of benzos, barbiturates, and alcohol are the only withdrawals that can actually kill somebody. Benzo withdrawal in particular lasts potentially for years and years after getting off of them entirely. It's really not withdrawal at that point, it's brain damage that you're needing to heal. But it's a
What
really
is,
brutal.
who gets benzos? Like, because I remember like learning through Amanita Dreamer, who, where Amy Dempster learned from, and you connected with her, like about benzos, but I never have been given any sort of medication for moods and, or any anxieties and stuff. So is the benzo like medicine more for anxiety or is it for depression? Or
Yeah, it's an
both?
anti-anxiety. It's an anti-anxiety med. They really should only. I mean, it's like Xanax. I'm sure you've
Okay.
heard of Xanax.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I just wasn't sure what the category included. Like you said,
yeah,
Klonopin. Yeah.
yeah, or Valium or Ativan. Yeah, so they're primarily prescribed for anxiety. They really well, doctors don't know a lot of the time. Like, there's been a huge push for awareness in the past 5, 10 years, but doctors often don't know what the damage of a lot of the things that they're prescribing can do. Benzos in particular.
Yeah, because people talk
So
about Xanax like, oh, I'm just going to pop a Xanax before I get on a flight or before I have to deal with this meeting or whatever. And you just hear it so casually that I kind of, it sends like a prickle down my spine. I hate when people say that shit, like, I don't know. So I'm glad
yeah,
that there's like an alternative and that's like actually has health benefits too. So
yeah.
that's
Well,
kind of
so
the purpose of this.
yeah, and the thing is, like, benzos are prescribed because they work. Like, they work extraordinarily well at what they're
Mhm.
meant to do. And if somebody has anxiety around flying, like, yeah, taking a little bit of Xanax or Klonopin or something before that flight will be massively helpful. But they should be utilized. If they're going to be utilized, they should be utilized in situations like that and not taken twice a day, day in and day out for a period of time. Even if you take it for a month, twice a day at a low to medium dose, like most people will go through withdrawal period when you get off
Mhm.
of it. And then the longer you take it, like the more brain damage it brings to you, and the longer and more difficult it is to get off of
What
it.
is the brain damage that it does? Like how does it damage the brain and what are the
It
side effects or
damages it
whatever?
damages the glutamate system, which is your excitatory system. So basically, what happens, your GABA system gets overstimulated, so it downregulates. So the GABA, which is your inhibitory, it's what like alcohol affects. Your GABA production goes to lower and lower and lower, while your glutamate production upregulates. It goes higher and higher and higher. And glutamate is the excitatory neuron. It causes, too much glutamate can cause neurotoxicity. It can cause things like, if somebody's glutamate is too high, they'll probably be anxious, have trouble sleeping, stuff like that. So your glutamate and GABA system, which are really intertwined, they should be like this. Benzos make them like this, but you have the benzo that's still making it feel like this. But when you get off of it, they're like this, and it takes a long time to heal that.
Mhm.
So I was a year off of benzos, a year to the day, when I found Amanita growing at my parents' house, and there was this just like unbelievable magnetic allure, just this unbelievable pull, to see what these were about. And they've always been on my radar, and I guess I always had that pull to some extent, but it wasn't like it wasn't time, I guess. And I can see how I knew that,
Mhm.
intuitively, but it just wasn't time. But so I picked them, and I went up to my parents' house and did some research, And everything online was, they're going to kill you, it's toxic, don't utilize, bad trip reports, bad experiences, which are people taking heroic doses thinking that that's the dose that they should take. We can get into that later if you want, but I ended
And raw. So
yeah, right,
yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or yeah, not preparing them properly. And then there was Amanita Dreamer online, who was the only person talking about them in a positive light. She had gone through, and this is the beginning of her channel. She had gone through what I was going through. Probably she preluded me about 6 months, it seemed. Because she had already gone through this process. She was in a similar position, destitute, didn't want to live anymore, didn't know how to live with this, horrible benzodiazepine withdrawal and brain damage. And then she said that Amanita healed her brain and brought her back to herself. And she outlined why she thought that worked. Amanita just so happens to have, well, there's a host of compounds, but the two main ones are ibotenic acid and muscimol. Ibotenic acid hits the glutamate system, and muscimol hits the GABA system. So pharmacologically, it makes sense. Somewhat. We're still dissecting this a lot and trying to gather data, but I ended up trying them, and yeah, I mean, there was a welcome home feeling, which I'd only felt with DMT prior to this, but it was different. And within that first microdose, it felt like I had healed 3-4 months worth of time when I came out of it. When I was under the influence of the microdose, I was like, the anxiety was, the fear and terror that I was living in was like super, like significantly lower. And yeah, afterwards it felt like I healed 3-4 months worth of time. So I started microdosing it consistently and took a couple larger doses, and within that first week or two it felt like I healed 2 years or so, which was miraculous and super powerful for me.
Did
So
did the GABA or the damage in your brain cause a lot of the fear that you were living with, or
yeah, 100%. Yep.
Okay.
But there's also another aspect of this, like, so when you're living in that fight or flight, like extreme fight or flight state consistently, you have experiences that trigger that fight or flight. So even as like, and then that becomes programmed into your body and into your energy field. So like, if there was something that, a significant other said at that point in time that like triggered a strong reaction, because you were going through this heightened and damaged system. When you're out of that and when your system's re-regulated, your body and your energy field are still programmed to react to that like that. So there's still this like whole need to reprogram yourself and pull up blocks, and it really like energetically, like it fucked me up. It put a lot of it put a lot of blocks in where I hadn't had them before. It also showed very blatantly all the areas that I needed to work on, which was a blessing. But yeah, so I reached out to Amanita Dreamer. I was building a CBD company at that point in time. I wanted to give myself something to do while I was going through benzo withdrawal, which was, it was very, very difficult, but it was probably really good for me. And it led me to where I am now. And I wrote her like a 4-page, 5-page letter, super long email. I gotta find that email and read it again. But she responded, and I offered to sponsor one of her videos, which we ended up doing. And then we got relatively close, and one thing led to another, and she ended up asking me to start selling Amanita because nobody in the country was doing it to scale. And now here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I know that you use people from all over the world, right? Different sources. Basically, Amanita is available on every continent, but Antarctica or something, right?
Yeah, I mean,
basically everywhere.
Yeah, it grows on every continent except for Antarctica. It also grows it grows all over the place. Like most areas here in the US, like most states have Amanita. Maybe it's trickier to find in some states, but I mean, yeah, it's a pretty accessible mushroom, and particularly if you have like, indigenous cultures that are like super into altering their consciousness, which is what indigenous cultures were very into. Like it's hard to imagine that they didn't, seek Amanita. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love the whole like Christmas connection and all of that, the shaman and Santa Claus. It's just
Yeah.
like so amazing. You're like, oh, this has been embedded in us. It's just like been dormant, you know? So
Yeah.
just as another way to like help people shift and like heal their heart and ancestral connections and all of that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Oh, I was gonna ask like, so how, I've talked about it, in that last episode with Amy, but just in case people hadn't heard that, like to consume it, like you get the dried amanita that's been cooked and heated or whatever from you, like you already take care of that step because that's an important step. And then the people who buy the product, they can turn it into tea or they could smoke it or make it a tincture or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what do you think is the
So
most common or the most favored version of
most people
consuming?
make the tea. Although that said, we sell since we came out with gummies and capsules and stuff, we sell more of those than
Yeah.
the raw mushroom,
Yeah.
just because people like it's convenient, it's easeability.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there's really three main compounds, and we're discovering a lot about the third one that nobody knew until recently. I actually have a good friend slash associate partner who has been diving into what muscarine does and the potential for muscarine. That's a whole nother conversation. But
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
two main ones that have been the most talked about are ibotenic acid, which I mentioned before, and then
Mhm.
muscimol.
Yeah.
So ibotenic acid decarb oxalates into muscimol. So if you have cannabis, let's say you have THC flower or something, and you burn that cannabis. THCA is inactive on its own, but as soon as you put the lighter to it and heat it up, it decarboxylates. It's losing an oxalate molecule. It decarboxylates into THC, which has a psychoactive effect. So it's similar with Amanita. Ibotenic acid decarboxylates into muscimol. Higher doses of ibotenic acid can get people nauseous.
Mhm.
It can have some unwanted side effects. Not everybody, some people really like ibotenic acid. I personally don't do any decarbing after the drying, but it's going to be very subjective and dependent on the person's physiology. But so as you dry the cap, so in its raw state, it has the highest concentration of ibotenic acid, most likely to get anybody sick and have very unpleasant side effects. Once it's dried, it decarboxylates a chunk of that into muscimol, so it's less likely to get people sick, but it's still people will still get sick on medium to higher doses if it's
Mhm.
not decarb a lot. Most people will. I don't, but most people will. And then when you utilize heat and acidity, you can decarb it even further. So most people, what they'll do is they'll get the raw material, the caps, dried caps, and then they'll mix that in a pot of water with a couple tablespoons of lemon juice, and they'll boil it or simmer it for 30 minutes, and that'll decarb it to a place where most everybody will not get nauseous or sick at all. I would say 95% of people will be able to
Mhm.
tolerate it at that point in time. So yeah, most people make the tea out of it doing that. But like I mentioned, capsules and gummies, with our gummies at least, they go through a similar decarbing process. The
Mhm.
capsules do not. It's just the raw encapsulated powder. But it's also at these low to microdose doses. I don't know personally of anybody that gets any nausea
Right.
from
I
a
can't
microdose.
say I have.
Yeah.
Um, so like, what's the purpose of taking it to help with anxiety, or to like, what are the other benefits besides, even though anxiety is a big one, and it's kind of heart opening.
Yeah.
What would you say are the like the healing benefits or the positives of taking it or consuming it?
Yeah, well, so I mean, anxiety is for sure a big one, and
Mhm.
everybody does have some level of anxiety to some extent or another. I
Mhm.
think addiction is a really, really big aspect of it, and addiction is not just like somebody that takes pain pills or somebody that drinks coffee. Even we're all addicted, and we're all addicted to our thoughts. Like that's the hands down, bar none, the biggest addiction on the planet. It's probably like the biggest it's the only real issue on the planet in some sense or another, because that addiction to thoughts leads to everything else that we see. But it does such a phenomenal job at redirecting thought processes back to more wholeness
Mhm.
or more love or more compassion, which ties into the heart. heart opening aspect. But yeah, a lot of people find that it helps with insomnia, depression. It's the
Mhm.
jolly Santa Claus mushroom, so it has this jolly aspect
I
to it.
have yet to do it in a group environment where it's like drum circles and fire, that kind of a thing. But so I've heard that's like where it kind of really lights up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we're actually in the process of, I think on the solstice, the summer solstice, we're going to hold an event, and we're
Hmm.
going to invite anybody out that wants to come. We'll have tickets for sale for the event itself if people want to come in person, and then people can also join via Zoom. But we'll do a massive. I would imagine we'll get a couple hundred people there, which would be awesome. We'll do
Yeah.
a massive ceremony, and then we'll start doing them every equinox and solstice, which will be really fun. So people can stay tuned for that. We're going to start releasing information about
I
that.
do know that like it comes to a certain point where people just have to go to sleep because like the way when the muscimol hits or whatever, it doesn't make you pretty tired. So what do you do?
Yeah.
They're just gonna like
Well,
sleep over.
I mean, it really depends on dosing and it depends on people's physiology. Like I personally like, but again, I don't decarb much, but it stimulates me. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
stimulating.
Mm-hmm.
Now it can also do a little bit of both. But so I'm gonna backtrack and then I'll touch on this again in a minute. But
Sure.
I think that what aside from like people finding it helps with anxiety, depression, OCD, pain, inflammation, nerve issues,
Nerve pain. Yeah, I know it's good for nerve pain.
yeah, or even neurological issues. We're finding some people stating that it's like done wonders for their late stage neurological Lyme disease or chronic COVID or whatever it's called, long
Mhm.
COVID. There's a lot of people that have said it's worked really wonderful for them for things like that. But I see it what we've discovered is that it's the integration medicine. So like, if somebody goes on well, really anything like whenever you want to change some aspect of yourself, or whenever you see or realize or understand something in a therapy session or on a psychedelic journey or whatever it may be, like you have to integrate that. So we're needing to integrate things all the time, all day, every day. Like it's just a thing that
Mhm.
humans have to do. Amanita is the best tool, hands down, bar none, for integrating, for helping humans integrate, which I
Mhm.
think gives it applicability in so many different fields or different realms of improvement or whatever it may be. Like it's a really powerful integration tool. And then back to our earlier point, it's fun that it grows on all continents and all these cultures that use, dream journeying or psychedelic journeys or whatever it may be, meditation, like they all had access to Amanita to help them integrate. I think that
Mhm.
that's a lost bit of knowledge that we're kind of starting to uncover. Um,
I know
but
it's
yeah,
neat, and it's like it can be like a frequency shift, like I have felt like a frequency shift, and that's just the only way to put it is that things just I felt a difference. And I also experimented with some it was like some herbal joint, it was like all these you know, legal safe herbs. I forget what the medley was, but there was like six different things in it, like rose and blue lotus was in it, and like mullein and I don't know what, but there was like six or seven things in it. And when I smoked it, I felt like I saw like lavender, like like my eyes were closed, and I felt like I just saw like a lavender, and I felt like
yeah,
a fairy essence with it. So it was
cool.
just kind of cool to like tap into these things. Like it never even occurred to me to like that any other herbs were smokable besides pot. Like
Yeah,
I don't know. I never, I just wasn't in that realm of thinking. So just that whole opening that door to that, it's like there's so many different tools to like shift our consciousness or like you said, help integrate or like shift your perspective or whatever. So
yeah,
have to be like
absolutely.
we I grew up in the dare days, of like the drug resistance education. And my father was a cop, so it's like so taboo. So it's like deconstructing all of like the shame and the taboo aspect of like venturing into this, world of other options and possibilities and things. So
Yeah.
it's pretty wild. And I know when Amy taught the class, she had you just muscle test to figure out like what your dose is. So like, what do you recommend people do? Like, were you already in that mindset of muscle testing or like intuitive trusting?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it is intuitive. You can't like explain to a customer emailing me wondering how to do that. Like, well, just do a muscle test. Nobody's
I
gonna
know,
know what
because
I'm
it's like
doing.
there's no directions like saying take two
Yeah,
gummies, whatever. So
yeah. One, we really can't
I
give too
know
much
because you have like the
direction.
FDA and you have to make sure that you're not
It's
promising
tricky.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tricky. But I would say the best way to do it is to start really small. So
Hmm.
generally, if people reach out and they want to know how to do it via email, I'll
Hmm.
say, well, most customers get the capsules or the Muscaria gummies and start with Muscaria and not Pantherine or Regalis because they're way more potent.
Right.
Uh, but and then they would take 1 to 2 units 2 to 3 times a day
Hmm.
for a week or so. and
Hmm.
and and and, and the key, the trick to all this is to like watch your thoughts. So like journaling is really important. Like you want to
Hmm.
see what the change in your thought processes is, because like again, everything starts in our thoughts and then it manifests outwardly from there. So like that's going to be the basis, but a lot of people aren't familiar or accustomed to watching how they think.
Yeah.
They're familiar with how their thoughts affect them physically or affect their reality, but they're not super tuned into to watching their
Yeah.
thoughts.
So you're kind of teaching
Uh,
people to dial inward. Like
yeah.
with the Blue Lotus, it was like it came up so many times in a short period of time that I was like, I need to look into this, and then I saw that you were selling it. Like, I don't know how the sequence of events led me there, but um, I only just tried it, like I said before we hit record, like over the weekend, but I slept really, really well. And I don't sleep badly, but I slept really well. And I had so many colorful dreams and like definitely had a lucid dream where like some scene played out and I was like, oh, let's try that again. And I like kind of like went backwards and like replayed the scene
Cool.
in a different way. So
That's fun.
it was fun. It was interesting. And I also tried the wild dagga. So, I'm just like, why not like try to educate myself and then use what I've learned to share it with people that I know as a way to open their minds, their hearts, and maybe choose differently, because like there's so many healing benefits to these products too. So can you talk about Blue Lotus a little bit then? I know it's ancient
Yeah.
Egyptian. That's like everything. That's always like the bottom line. Ancient Egypt. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the history is probably a lot more in depth than we're aware of. I mean, and
mhm.
and I'm sure they knew this back then as well, but again, this is lost information and knowledge. One of the things that we're finding is that when people microdose Blue Lotus or taking it consistently in very low subperceptual amounts, Blue Lotus is really subtle and mild on its own anyways, but if one takes it consistently, it does open their heart in some sense. Like
Mhm.
maybe they're not going to have the full like bliss, ecstatic love for weeks and weeks, but it opens people's capacity to hold more love and to hold
Mhm.
more compassion and empathy, which is really cool. I mean, that's something obviously that we need more in the world right now, but it's a really, really powerful heart opener. It also seems to really quiet the thoughts. And again, if one isn't used to watching their thoughts, it might be almost not noticeable for them. People sometimes get frustrated, like this isn't doing anything. It's like,
Right.
well, it very likely is. It's possible that it's not. There are some people that just don't get anything from various substances, but it's more likely that you're just not tuning into what it's actually doing.
But is it also like have to be in your system? Like it has to kind of accumulate for a little while before. I mean, I definitely did feel something with with all of them, but maybe there's something to using it consecutively for it to build up so it's more noticeable. Like it's not just like a
Yeah.
one and done experience.
Yeah, I think that that's really reasonable. And I mean, particularly like we in our paradigm in this world, like they're not interested. They have not been interested in that nearly as much as like, let's just have the most
Quick
intense
fix.
experience we
Yeah.
have, instead of like, let's tune in. I think that's what a lot of this is. It's like we're tuning in to these. It's like the shamanic dieta, we're tuning into these energies and these frequencies and embodying that frequency in our energy field so that it will bring the gifts that the various plant sort of medicines have to offer. But yeah, I think that there is something to it building up for sure. I think, yeah, I mean, from a physical pharmacological level, that makes sense. From an energetic level, you're just, the more it's, the longer your energy, the longer it's in your energy field, like the more you will, it's like tuning forks, like if you bang one, like the other is going to start resonating. So the longer you have that resonance building, the more you'll be able to embody it fully moving forward. Yeah.
So you had to like educate yourself on all of the different plant medicines all over the world, and then you just decided to reach out to people in South Africa and see if they want to sell you wild daga and whatever. Like, how's that work?
So, like I mentioned, I've played around with all of these. So I've been using these all my entire life. I've experienced, everything. I can't think of one thing on the website that I hadn't utilized prior. I never utilized a daga extract, for example, but I'd utilized wild daga. But yeah, I mean, so I've already been really familiar. But yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of my time has been spent trying to source good product, and I'm also pretty meticulous with the products that I carry. Like, I want the best products, and I also want them at reasonable prices. If I find the best and it's not at a super cheap price, I'll still get it, but I will still be looking for different sources, But yeah, so I mean, yeah, I have hit up people in Africa and Asia and whatever, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
And
with the
like,
Amanita stuff, it's been really interesting because I was the first. We're at the top of Google, and we're the first in the country to do this to scale. So I haven't had to reach at all for Amanita stuff. People hit me up, so
okay.
I'll get people from all over the world, like, and I've bought an obscene amount of test sample kilos just to like see how it is, and try it out. And I go with maybe 1/5 to 1/8 of the vendors that are suppliers that I actually try out. And then there's other things that go into the consideration, like it's quality, drying technique, price, of course, but then also, like, who are you? What do you do? We like to purchase from families, so it's mom, dad, kids, uncle, and they go out in fall and they harvest, and that's how they make their money for the whole year. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
either we're purchasing from them directly, or we're purchasing from an individual who has 50 families in their area that they purchase from, and then they sell it all to us, which is a little bit easier. But yeah, so there's a novelty to the story, and we want to help good people out and stuff. So yeah,
And like,
there's
and
a
it's
whole.
like the Siberia version is a little different than the whatever other versions. Like, I remember there was like a couple different locations to pick from.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it's interesting because there was nobody else talking about this when we started this. There was no, like, different regions have different effects. There's none of that. It was all from my subjective experience, where I'm like, this one feels a little bit more like this, and this one feels a little bit more like this. And so I didn't know, and I didn't know if this was going to be everybody's thought process too, right?
Right.
It's very subjective, but it seems to be relatively consistent. I also don't know, like, maybe I programmed that into the collective consciousness in some sense. I don't know,
Right.
but yeah, it does seem to be relatively consistent. Where the Siberian are a little bit deeper, not more potent, but deeper. The Carpathians seem to be a little bit more. Well, so Siberian or deeper, Baltic seem to be more energizing, and the Carpathian seem to be in the middle. I say the Carpathian seems to be the most creative inducing, which is kind of cool. We just recently got the Nordic, and the Nordics, I mean, and it's funny too because of, like, the story, like, Vikings apparently ate Amanita before going to battle, and that's how they got their berserk status.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Nordics, they just feel like power. So they're
Yeah.
just power, they're power. And, like, I don't know if that's, maybe the Vikings programmed that into the Nordic region, you know
Right.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
then every now and again we'll get Brazilian Amanitas, and they feel shamanic. I don't I don't know. It's very interesting. But
That's so cool. Like, just the energy of the land, that's really
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
And what about blending them? Like, cause like I did the wild daga as a tea, and then I did the blue lotus as a tea, and I drank them separately. And then I was like, if they were going to be a smoke blend, they could be together. Would you throw Amanita in there? Would you, like, I know mullein is always supposed to be a good additive for smoking because it like evens things out, and it's beneficial. So like, what's the thoughts there with the whole blending? And like, is there some things that should not be blended or anything like that?
Not particularly. I mean, Kana is one thing that we carry. It has strong SNRI properties, so it's a serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor,
Mhm.
which is it's like traditional uh, depression medication, which are generally SSRIs, so they're just serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But so that generally shouldn't be mixed with any serotoninogenic substance, should not be mixed with medication. Other than that, so it's kind of the one thing that people have to be kind of concerned about. Other than that, everything mixes great, and there's a lot of synergy generally. We have, we're actually working on. I have an agreement with Amanita Dreamer about specific products that I want to release, to not release them in front of her so that she can, because we make her products as well, so that she can, get it's just an agreement between the
Yeah.
two of us. If I didn't have that going, we'd have a bunch of smoke blends and tea blends and stuff out. But yeah, I mean, they're great to mix. Particularly, I think that Blue Lotus is like the synergy
Mhm.
plant, so it mixes well with just about everything, really well with Amanita. I'm working on, I actually just last night, I told Travis, who runs the distribution center and product manufacturing, I told him that I want a new tincture. I want it to have Blue Lotus, Amanita, rose, and lavender.
Mhm.
And then I want to put some, adventuring or some other like crystal at the bottom that's heart chakra related. It'll be a
That's
heart
cool.
opening.
Yeah,
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 it'll be
that sounds
a
great.
heart opening microdose tincture.
Yeah.
And I think that it will do, I think that it will do the job really, really well. Like I think that Amanita is kind of the missing ingredient in a lot of these like mushroom coffees, or the
Yeah.
7-in-1, 7 blend mushroom pills. Like
Mhm.
Amanita is the thing that's missing in all these. So I
Right.
think, yeah, particularly Amanita and Blue Lotus mixed together with something like rose, which is a very strong heart
Yeah.
opener, and then lavender as well. I think it'll be a
That's pretty
powerful.
cool. And what about tobacco in the mix? Like, is that something that's like not even like something you consider, or is it?
No, I love tobacco.
I know
But
I've
tobacco,
grown to like it. So like, at times I would smoke cigarettes, but like cigarettes are gross, and it's like, whatever. So, but when I was trying with the Amanita last year and I was smoking, I smoked it and I was like, ugh, it just tastes so gross. And I was like, I feel like it needs tobacco. So I actually ended up buying tobacco and then mixing it with tobacco. But then I got to like, and I'm like almost like apologetic because I feel like, like this good girl, like, oh, my good girl, whatever. But I'm like
yeah,
embarrassed to admit that like I like to smoke tobacco. But like if I put it in a pipe, like a little bong, and just do it by itself, it's like amazing. I love tobacco by itself, and I don't do a lot of it. It's just so grounding, and it feels so calming and so good. And I only do it like occasionally, like once a week or so, but like it's amazing. So like with the Amanita, it burns it better and it makes it taste good. So I
yeah.
wasn't sure if there's like any reason not to do that, or if it like overtakes or takes away from, if you were to blend it with those other herbs.
No, no. I mean, I think that there's a lot of synergy too. I smoke a pipe, like a tobacco pipe, like puffing on a pipe
Hmm.
every couple of days, which I really enjoy. But I think tobacco in particular, it's so there's a Aubrey Marcus is a podcaster. I really enjoy his podcasts. Very much into the spiritual side of everything. But he has an ayahuasca experience where he met the spirit of tobacco as it was,
Oh, cool.
anthropomorphized him. And it was this like huge, like burly lumberjack, kind of like a Paul Bunyan, maybe in some sense, from what I remember about his experience. But uh, he had a wolf or a dog or something like chained up, like that he was, on a leash or whatever.
Hmm.
And he was like, "I'm an ally." And Aubrey was like, "Cool. What about that rabid looking dog?" And he was like, "Well, that's the addiction. If
Yeah.
you get once you get addicted, like hands off.
Right.
That dog is not your ally, but I'm your ally," which I think is
Okay.
a really interesting way
Yeah.
to look at it. But yeah, I mean, I think, and tobacco's like it's a grandfather plant. It's the top of the in the plant kingdom in South America. Like it's the king.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is for a very good reason. It's also very clearing, and yeah, I mean, there's for sure a space for it. There's a space for really. I mean, again, I think that Amanita is like it's a missing link in a lot of things. I think that there's a lot of opportunity and room to play around with different combinations. And if anybody's listening to this and they try a combination that they really like, please let us know and we'll make products with it. So,
Yeah, I did like a little mix last week of like in the end, I was like, let me just make a little blend. And I was a little bit of tobacco, a little bit of cannabis, really not much. And then the mullein, the mugwort, the blue lotus, and the wild dagga. And I just like put it through the coffee grinder and made a little batch of it. So,
that sounds great.
but it was like, yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't do tobacco because there are very strong laws around that here from the
Oh,
tobacco
funny.
companies lobbying. But
People, people are welcome to make their own. Yeah.
yeah. But we're actually in the process of building. I don't know when this is going to happen. We're building two new companies, or what? I mean, it's under the Minnesota Nice roof, but we're building a Christian's Kratom company, which will be fun. Kratom can be very, very
The
medicinal. You can
kratom, I don't
also
that is the kratom.
yeah, well, so it hits the opiate receptors. It also hits serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. In low doses, it's stimulating with a little bit of an opiate like body
Mm-hmm.
euphoria. And
Mm-hmm.
then in higher doses, it's more sedating and really pain relieving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, really wonderful plant, but it's also similarly, I'm sure if I met the kratom spirit, they would have a similar thing on a leash,
Yeah,
because
right.
it can be, and the addiction to it can be, it's a way better alternative to people that are using prescription pain meds or heroin or fentanyl.
Right.
But there is still an addiction associated with it, albeit it's significantly less brutal than something like traditional opiate
Right.
addictions are.
Right.
But yeah, so we're working on that right now. And then we're also working on a Christian's cannabis website, which will be really fun. So, and then maybe even a storefront in North Carolina,
Is
possibly.
it? Yeah, because I know like every state has their own rules, so I don't know what Minnesota's at.
Yeah, well, it gets tricky. So, like the idea would be we'll have everything listed. However, every product is going to have its own restrictions on where it can ship.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
yeah, so it's a little bit tricky. And it makes the building of the website complicated, but it's something that we're and
Yeah,
it's in production. Yeah,
I know. I heard your crazy story. So it's like it's not without risk. But but
nothing's without risk, especially in this industry.
at
Right?
least
That's
you know
okay.
you have a good lawyer and you know what you're doing is legal. You're not doing anything illegal.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got
Well,
that.
I am. If somebody needs to pave the way and take the slings and arrows and bullets, like I'm happy to do that. So I'll
Yeah,
I'll do all that, and it won't take us out. And in the process, maybe in the process, the story will bring more people on board, or it'll help the word get out a little bit more. Honestly, what it did, that experience is it freed me up to do a lot of things because I got the distribution center in Virginia. I moved most everything out of my location here, and they're doing 80%, 90% of the work now.
mhm,
And then I'll be giving emails over to them, and then my workload will be really, really minimal dealing with wholesale people. And then at that point, I can start doing expos, shows more often, speaking
right,
engagement, podcasts,
right.
um, things of this nature that are more in line with my skills, but also it's just the logical next step to get this medicine out to more people.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And it's like you're like a pioneer, like it's kind of crazy to think about it, but thanks
I,
for
I mean,
carving out.
I think that in some sense we're making history with what we're doing. I think that in the years to come, it will be known that we did make history. I really do. Yeah, I
Yeah,
really do.
I'm sure of it. It feels like you're at the forefront. So I'm just appreciative that you're, willing to share some time here and
For sure.
educate
I,
others. And
I appreciate you opening up your platform. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah,
yeah, it's all about trying to just educate and destigmatize these things and give it the voice and the chance for people to learn from it. So,
100%.
so and where can
Absolutely.
people find you if they're looking for your website or your Instagram or whatever?
Yeah, so it's Minnesota Nice, MN Nice Ethnobotanicals. So honestly, if you type in, I'm sure you'll have a link in the description
Yeah,
or
I will.
whatever.
I will.
If you type in like by Amanita Muscaria, like we'll be basically at the top,
Yeah,
maybe
I
a
think
couple.
there's like dashes in your website, right? Like MN dash
Yeah,
botanicals or
well,
something.
so we have a bunch of different domain names. That was just the domain name that was initially purchased. So like people can go to mnniceethno.com or mn-nice-ethnobotanicals.com
Yeah.
or mnnicebotanicals.com. There's a bunch of different ones, but yeah, that's where you can find us. I think on Instagram, same deal. Just type in mn-nice-ethno or whatever, you'll find us.
No problem. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Christian.
Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.